up to this point, we learned the if statement, the if-else statement, and the else-if statement. And if you remember our section outline, well, we haven't mentioned these two for JavaScript conditionals. So we're going to tackle those today. As you can see, we have two more to get through, but don't be scared. These are not going to introduce anything new. They're just different ways of doing control flow, but they won't do anything that a simple if-else statement can't do. However, there are cases where it will be much easier to do these two than if we do something with the if-else statement. So let's check them out. The first one we're going to talk about is the ternary operator. It looks something like this. Condition, question mark, expression 1, or expression 2. And that is the syntax. It says, is this true or false? If it's true, then provide this value. If it's false, provide this value. Let me show you an example of this. We'll have a function called isUserValid that accepts a Boolean, and we'll just return the Boolean value. Now within here, we can say variable answer equals isUserValid, and we'll just say true for now, question mark. So if that's true, I'll say you may enter. Otherwise, I'll say access denied. Let me make this a little bit smaller so you can see. So again, all we're saying is if this is true, then do this expression. If this is false, do this expression. So let's just copy this into the console and see what happens. If I run answer, oops, I spelled that wrong, answer, I get you may enter because user is valid. It's true. Now, if I change this to say false, well, in that case, I'll get access denied. Let's do a little bit more of a complicated answer. We can say variable automated answer, and we can say, and I'll do this on a new line just so you can see, your account number is user valid, and we'll just say something like false for now. So because we have these brackets, we're going to have an expression inside of here that we can evaluate. So we can say, is user valid? If the user is valid, we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4. If not, we'll say not available. If we copy and paste this here into our console, and we can see it better, we see if user is valid, we want to say 1, 2, 3, 4. If it's not, then not available. So if I run this and now I look at automated answer, I get your account number is not available. Well, because is user valid is false. But if I do true, well, in that case, your account number is 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you might notice that this is actually not that different from if you did function condition, we'll just call it condition, and we'll say if is user valid, return you may enter. And you did else, return access denied. This function over here, condition, if I say variable answer 2 equals condition, let's see what happens. I copy these two run them. And now if I look at answer, I get you may enter. If I get answer 2, I get you may enter. Now, it's the exact same thing other than, well, a bit of misspelling on my part. But you see that one way is a lot nicer. It's just nice, simple one line. A ternary operator is really, really good for these if-else, where there's a check for a condition and there's 2 possible expressions that come out of it. All right, let's learn the next one, which is the switch statement. This is the fun one. So a switch statement looks something like this, and we can build a simple game right now to demonstrate how it works. I can say function move command, and we'll say it accepts parameter direction. Within this function, I'll say variable what happens, and we'll say switch. Notice that it's a keyword, so it's now highlighted in red, and I'll say direction. The switch statement is going to accept direction. It's going to check direction. And within here, we'll say case forward, which means check direction. If direction equals forward, then what happens equals to you encounter a monster. Break. I'll explain what break does right after I finish up the rest of the case statements. So case statements, as you can see, are really good because I can just copy and paste. And now I can say for here, we'll say back. And if direction is back, we'll say you arrived home. If the direction is right, in that case, we'll say you found a river. And if the direction is left, we'll say you run into a troll. And then finally, we'll say default what happens equals to please enter a valid direction. And we'll end it with a return what happens. All right, that was a whole lot of code. Let's run this command first, and then we'll explain exactly what is happening. Copy the code, copy it into the console, and now we have the move command. And if you remember the last video, move command now exists in the root scope, which is window. So within here, let's just say forward. Now, if I run this, I get you encountered a monster. If I go back, you arrived home. If I go right, you found a river. If I go left, you run into a bull. And if I write gibberish, I get please enter a valid direction. That's what switch statements are really good for. When you have a lot of conditions, instead of using an if, else if, else if, else if, else if, else statement, you can use a switch statement. And you can see it reads nicely. Essentially what it's saying is create variable, what happens, then switch, I want you to check whatever the condition is, whatever the variable is. In this case, it's the direction. And in case the direction equals forward, do this. In case direction is back, do this. If it's right, do this. If it's left, do this. And it says default is if none of these conditions work, and remember the program goes line by line. So it checks forward, then it checks back, and it checks right, and it checks left. And if nothing of those match, then it says you can just default to please enter a valid direction. And then we return what happens so that the function returns something for us. Now finally, what is the break? Well, the break simply says if case is forward, then assign you encountered a monster to what happens variable, and then break. Break is just saying break out of the switch statement. So instead of the program then checking to see if case is back, case is right, case is left, or default, if we say break, the program stops here and then goes straight out of the switch statement to return what happens. So if I actually do break before what happens, you encountered a monster, and I copy this, and let's rerun the function. We'll say move command is forward. Notice what happens now. I get undefined because we broke. The program entered saying, oh yeah, he typed in forward. But before we're able to assign something to the variable, I say break. I exit out of the switch statement and I return what happens, which it's only been declared, but it's unassigned. So I just return undefined. All right, there you have it. Your two other conditionals, and you've covered all of them in JavaScript now. Each one is good for its own individual case, but they're all very useful. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.